A daughter-in-law is like an ATM if you oppose. Divorce awaits, my mother-in-law cheerfully exclaimed over the phone. She has always derived joy from being harsh to me, subjecting me to many unpleasant experiences. Since my father-in-law passed away, I thought she felt lonely, so I endured it. But I had already surpassed my limit of endurance. Furthermore, my mother-in-law had a serious misunderstanding. It was not just one or two things. It was a decisive misunderstanding. I took a deep breath and informed her of a certain truth. Right after that, I could hear her scream from the other side of the phone. I, Helena Wright, am a 46-year-old housewife, juggling part-time work and household chores. My friends and acquaintances describe me as someone who doesn't get upset easily and has a strong mental. A while after starting my career, I met and married Brant, a man my own age. We hit it off the first time we met, but the occasion was a mixer I was invited to by a friend. Just when I was thinking about taking a break from romance, my friend meddled too much and set up the mixer, saying, "This will delay your marriage prospects." The mixer was organized by my friend to meet men herself, but I felt like I was being used. Reluctantly attending the mixer, I sat at a corner seat and ate and drank alone, not wanting to stand out. Then, glancing around, I saw someone at the opposite table also diminishing their presence and drinking. Our eyes met and we started talking somewhat naturally. That person was Brant, whom I would marry later on. It's quite tough for both of us, isn't it? As it became clear neither of us was enjoying the mixer. Brant made such a comment with a wry smile. His smile at that moment looked endearingly indescribable. After the mixer ended, I exchanged contact information with him. Initially, our relationship was just as good friends, but as Brant took the initiative to confess, we started dating. Then, at the age of 30, I married Brant. 2 years later, our son Tyler was born, and we have been living happily ever since. Brant's parents live hours away by train, and we lead lives far apart from each other. When I decided to marry him, the distance actually felt reassuring. That's because every time my mother-in-law saw me, she would hurl harsh words at me. "Did you really marry such an unfeminine woman, Brant? Someone cuter would be more suitable for you." The first time we met, I thought she was just looking me over, but then she suddenly said that. I was so shocked that I froze. It was my first time being addressed so rudely upon meeting someone, and I didn't know how to respond. Afterward, seeing that I didn't react, my mother-in-law took it as a cue to verbally attack me even further. I was expecting some stylish souvenir from a city person, but what's this? Unadorned baked goods. You have no taste. The souvenir I chose was a popular assortment from a very famous store. Indeed, its appearance was simple, but the taste was exquisite, and I wanted Brant's parents to enjoy it. However, it seemed my intentions weren't conveyed at all. The first family meeting ended centered around criticism from my mother-in-law. During it, my father-in-law said nothing, acting as if nothing was amiss, and Brant only managed a troubled smile, never stepping in. "Well, we live apart, and we won't meet that often after getting married," I encouraged myself and proceeded with the wedding preparations. I didn't exchange contact information with my mother-in-law, and living in the city, I could avoid any direct impact. As I expected, after marrying Brant, our interactions with my mother-in-law were few, and we have been living peacefully. Later, I became pregnant with Tyler and gave birth without any problems. After the birth, my mother-in-law was noisy about wanting to see her grandson, but Brant handled it well. "I'm truly glad I married him," I thought wholeheartedly. It wasn't uncommon for many husbands to prioritize their mothers, neglecting their wives and children, but I was relieved that Brant was not like that. Our tranquil life continued even after Tyler was born. He has already grown quite a bit, and is currently 14 years old, in his second year of middle school. Tyler is now seriously considering his future path and aiming for one of the top high schools in the city. It seems he's entered a rebellious phase, responding with a typical "you're annoying" whenever I gently point out something. However, he appears confused by his inability to be straightforward. After his defiant actions, he sometimes apologizes in a voice so low it's barely audible. Understanding his struggle to express himself, I quietly watch over his growth without overreacting. Lately, my main concern is his adorable rebellious phase. There are no major issues in daily life. Work is going well, and I currently earn more than Brant. Brant has been busy with work and coming home late, but it isn't much of a problem. We were living very peaceful days. Then, suddenly, an incident occurred. It's serious. Dad has suddenly collapsed. Really? That's serious. We were relaxing as a family of 3 during the weekend, but then an urgent call came from my mother-in-law. Brant usually goes out alone on his days off, but this time we were all together and discussing what to do. We need to rush over there. Yes, let's get ready. Tyler, pack for 3 days. Got it. In this situation, Tyler obediently followed my instructions without exception. We quickly prepared and left the house, dashing to catch the train. However, on our way to the hospital directed by my mother-in-law, unfortunately, my father-in-law had passed away. Dad. Why? I wasn't very close to my father-in-law, having spoken to him very little. But seeing Brant grieve, I was engulfed in sadness too. At that moment, my mother-in-law was crying loudly, and her usual harsh words towards me were absent. After the hectic funeral, we returned home. A few days after the sad event, as I was preparing dinner in the kitchen, Brant suddenly made a surprising suggestion. I want to let Mom live in this house, Brant said earnestly as I exclaimed in shock. What did you say? After Dad passed away, Mom has been very down, and I'm worried about her, Brant continued with a serious face. She's getting old and we can't leave her alone. That is, well, I understand, but my mother-in-law has never hidden her hostility toward me. Starting to live with her makes me anxious about how it might change our peaceful life. Brant seemed displeased that I didn't agree immediately. He looked at me with a slightly angry face and said, "This house is mine. I decide who lives here." I was taken aback by Brant's unusually strong stance. He is usually gentle, and often silently agrees with my decisions. However, that's not because I forcefully decide things, but because Brant is the type who can't make decisions himself, so a natural division of roles has developed between us. After shouting at me, Brant angrily went back to his room. Well, if Brant has decided, then I must follow. I had no intention of treating someone who was lonely badly. I thought we should warmly welcome my mother-in-law since she must be feeling lonely too. However, excuse my intrusion. Oh, take that luggage to my room. And for tonight's dinner, let's have steak. To celebrate moving in, please get a nice steak, okay? As soon as she arrived at the house, my mother-in-law started giving orders with a commanding attitude. Oh, Tyler. Don't just sit there, bring Grandma's luggage. You're the youngest, so you need to work hard for me. Who is the eldest? While she doted on Tyler, she considered herself the most important member of the family and naturally adopted a commanding tone. Tyler, with a troubled look, did as his grandmother said. Tyler understood that arguing back would only make the situation worse. Come on, move it. This is no time to be zoning out. Under my mother-in-law's commands, we were forced to hustle. After my father-in-law passed away, instead of feeling lonely, my mother-in-law started living freely in our house. It would be one thing to just tolerate her whims, but as soon as we started living together, she began harshly bullying me. What is this? This side dish is too salty to eat. Are you trying to send me to the hospital with high blood pressure? Complaining about the meals I make was a daily occurrence. Moreover, it has become a habit for her to complain at every meal. In our home, we use normal seasonings and aim for the taste to be light. Tyler and Brant preferred meals with light flavors. Yet, despite this, my mother-in-law complains that the food is too salty. It is clear that she is nitpicking to annoy me. Furthermore, she constantly complains about laundry, cleaning, and all household chores. One day, reaching my limit, I handed her the vacuum cleaner and retorted, "If you say so much, please show me an example. I would like to learn from you." Taking the vacuum cleaner from me, my mother-in-law showed off her cleaning skills, which were surprisingly ordinary, with no noticeable difference from mine. "Cleaning should be done like this," she declared confidently, and I wondered how she could be so sure. One day, I finished work in the morning and returned home early. When I arrived, my mother-in-law was with an unfamiliar woman. "This is Diana Bennett, who I've become good friends with since moving here. We get along very well." Mizu Bennett briefly greeted me and then continued her conversation with my mother-in-law. Indeed, a daughter-in-law must be properly educated. "Sylvia is too soft." "No, I don't think that's true." Apparently, Mizu Bennett seems to be a good confidante for my mother-in-law. I pretended not to hear their conversation and started preparing dinner in the kitchen. The two occasionally looked our way, bearing unpleasant smiles. Just as I sensed the uncomfortable atmosphere, a loud sound suddenly erupted. Oh, sorry about that. On the floor was the coffee cup Mizu Bennett had been holding. Fortunately, it hadn't broken, but the coffee had spilled on the floor. "Could you wipe that up?" As I began wiping the coffee from the floor, suddenly something fell on my head. "What are you doing?" Sorry, my hand slipped. What had landed on my head was the coffee my mother-in-law was holding. The two burst out laughing, looking as if nothing serious had happened. "I'm home." "What's going on?" "It's a bit noisy." At that moment, Tyler came home from school. He took in the scene at a glance and immediately understood what was happening. "What are you doing, you two?" Tyler voiced his anger loudly at the two. He pulled a towel from his bag and carefully wiped my head. Tyler, even though he is usually rebellious and distant, the way he wiped my head showed how kind he actually was. After Tyler had wiped the mess, he glared sharply at my mother-in-law and Mizu Bennett. "What are you doing to my mom?" "Tyler, dear, you're misunderstanding. This was just an accident." "Shut up. Do you think I don't know what you usually do to Mom? If you're so busy bullying her, maybe spend your time on something more worthwhile." Silenced by Tyler's resolute words, the two were left speechless. "Who are you, anyway?" "Someone who does this to my mom isn't a guest. Get out now." Under Tyler's forceful presence, Mizu Bennett quickly left the house. My mother-in-law couldn't rebut Tyler's resolute attitude and went back to her room sullenly. "Thank you, Tyler. It's not just for you, Mom. I just drove away some weird people. I need to study, and I want to avoid noise." Watching Tyler speak shyly, I felt truly blessed to have him. However, the trouble didn't end there. When Brant came home, it seemed that my mother-in-law had tattled to him about the incident. "Why did you do that to Grandma and her friend?" Brant raised his voice and scolded Tyler. Tyler's expression clouded over, and my mother-in-law watched with a nasty smile. "Brant, you've got it all wrong. Tyler was just trying to protect me." "Protect you?" "Mom says Tyler just barged into the living room, made a lot of noise, and chased them out. I thought it was a joke." My mother-in-law had twisted the facts to suit herself and reported them to Brant. I tried desperately to explain the situation, but Brant wouldn't listen. "First of all, you two are too cold to Mom. She is my dear mother. You should respect her more." Brant's one-sided lecture continued, and Tyler and I couldn't say anything. While I understand Brant's desire to care for his mother, I struggled with the difficulty of getting him to understand the situation accurately. Brant was taking our words too lightly and believing only what his mother said. Because we had been living away from my mother-in-law, I hadn't realized how much of a mama's boy Brant was, but it had become clear. This has really turned into a mess. Lately, my days are filled with more sighs than ever. Following this incident, my mother-in-law became even more confident and started to twist the facts and report them to Brant whenever there was any resistance from us. This has led to a very troublesome situation, and even 3 months after the incident, Tyler and I continue to avoid contact with my mother-in-law and strive to live as peacefully as possible. Then, one day, where's my card? While organizing receipts from my wallet, I realized that one credit card was missing a black card. Did I drop it somewhere? As I pondered, scratching my head, my smartphone in my pocket rang. Oh, it's from my mother-in-law. I grimaced involuntarily, letting out my true feelings. I was tempted to ignore the call, but considering the hassle it could create later, I reluctantly answered. Hello, yes. Hi, hey Helena. Try guessing where I am. My mother-in-law sounded cheerfully mischievous over the phone, presenting me with this riddle. I don't know. I responded nonchalantly, showing little interest. Undeterred by my reaction, she continued brightly. I'm at a travel agency right now. You see, I've been planning a trip to Hawaii with 20 of my close relatives. Oh, that sounds fun, I replied vaguely, but then she dropped an unbelievable bombshell. By the way, you're treating us to this trip. I borrowed the black card from your wallet, and I've memorized the PIN, so I'll be using it. What are you talking about? My shock was met with her boisterous laughter. A daughter-in-law is just like an ATM if she objects, divorce awaits. Laughter erupted from her relatives on the other end as well. I've never met my mother-in-law's relatives, but it seems they shared her troublesome nature. Comments like "go easy on her" and "you're going to make her cry" were audible among the laughter. However, I was no longer disturbed by her or her relatives' words. There were more important things for me to focus on now. By the way, I've already canceled that card, and me and Brant have been divorced for 2 months now. What? I could hear my mother-in-law's bewildered voice on the other end. It seemed she hadn't understood the situation at all. Puzzled, I decided it was time to explain everything from the beginning, furrowing my brows in anticipation of the conversation that would follow. There had been several concerning signs even before my mother-in-law moved into our home. One was Brant's increasingly late returns from work and his frequent outings on holidays. Brant wasn't particularly excelling at his job. As a result, his income had been stagnant for years, and our financial situation was becoming progressively more difficult. That's why I had taken the initiative to work actively and support our household. It seemed Brant wasn't concerned about his low income at all. He appeared to believe, we can live comfortably with this salary, and there's no need to push ourselves too hard, but in reality, our financial stability was only due to my hard work. Despite this, Brant was family-oriented and helped with household chores, so I hadn't felt major dissatisfaction with our lifestyle. However, the days where Brant came home late became more frequent. He claimed he was working overtime, but it wasn't reflected in his salary. This is unpaid overtime. It's good to owe someone a favor, as it might lead to promotion or a raise. It was unnatural for Brant, who had previously shown little interest in his career, to suddenly start talking this way. Moreover, as his overtime increased, so did his solo outings on holidays. Lately, you've been going out alone a lot. How about we go somewhere as a family next week? One day, I suggested to Brant that we go out as a family, but he immediately declined. Actually, I recently bumped into an old classmate here by chance. I've made plans to meet him next week. Oh, and by the way, it's a guy, so you don't have to worry, okay? Brant's hurried explanation, even though I hadn't asked about the person's gender, felt distinctly off. From that conversation, I sensed something was amiss and began to discreetly investigate Brant's activities. As I delved deeper, evidence of his infidelity began to surface one after another. The meeting Brant claimed was with an old male classmate was indeed real, but the person was not a man, it was a woman. I can't believe I found so much evidence. Maybe I was really oblivious all this time. Considering how busy I had been working in Brant's place, I convinced myself that was the reason for my unawareness. Even when Brant's infidelity became clear, I didn't feel particularly shocked. I had loved Brant and thought marrying him was the right choice. But the moment his betrayal towards Tyler and me came to light, any affection I had vanished. Furthermore, right after his affair came to light, Brant had his mother move in, seemingly as a way to force a new living arrangement. My fondness for Brant completely disappeared, turning into negative sentiment. Still, had he shown genuine remorse, I was prepared to forgive him. I gathered all the evidence I had collected and waited for a moment when we could be alone to confront him directly. "You've been having an affair, haven't you?" Brant could not hide his astonishment as he looked at the pile of evidence I presented. He tried to argue, blurting out, "It's not my fault. You were always busy with work and neglected me. You're also to blame for my affair." Shockingly, instead of apologizing, Brant reacted defiantly, attempting to justify his actions by blaming me. "I didn't want to have an affair by choice. It happened because you didn't show me enough affection. You took me for granted, and that's why this happened." He lashed out, slamming his hand on the desk, thinking perhaps that his aggressive attitude would make me cower and comply. Such reasoning and refusal to accept fault were incredibly difficult for me to accept. "Is that all you have to say?" I asked coldly, yet calmly, pushing the already filled-out divorce papers towards him. His complexion changed drastically in an instant, turning pale. "What? This is a joke, right?" "This is no joke. Wait, please. Divorce is too extreme. It was just an affair." Despite Brant's desperate attempts to explain, I only offered him a chilly gaze and words. "You call it just an affair, but do you really think betraying me and Tyler can be dismissed as just an affair? You truly don't seem to understand the gravity of your actions. Betrayal of family and infidelity are legitimate grounds for divorce, as stated by law." At the mention of law, Brant was at a loss for words. Seizing the moment, I pressed on. "You said you had an affair because I was busy, but the truth is, I had to work because you couldn't earn enough. Blaming me while excusing your own incompetence is utterly shameless. People like you have no sense of shame." Brant's eyes welled up at my unyielding words. He was not typically a strong-willed person. Trying to win an argument without acknowledging his faults was futile. "I don't want a divorce. I can't handle it." Brant began to sob. But tears are only excusable for children. If you didn't want a divorce, you shouldn't have had an affair in the first place. Even a child understands this simple logic. If you say you don't want a divorce, I'll hire a lawyer and start the proceedings immediately. I will use any means necessary to end our marriage. My desire to divorce Brant was not only because of his infidelity, but also because I wanted to distance myself from his mother. I felt I could no longer live with her. Therefore, I was determined to follow through with the divorce, and I maintained a consistent stance. Eventually, Brant agreed to the divorce. He signed the divorce papers, and seeing the document, I sighed in relief. "Please wait a bit before telling Mom. I'll tell her myself. She might be shocked and upset," Brant said. Though surprised by his thoughtful request, I agreed. "All right. In the meantime, I'll prepare to move out. Also, I will have custody of Tyler. It would be difficult for you to support both him and your mother with your income," I stated. Brant nodded silently, saying nothing more. The divorce papers were promptly filed. Regarding the division of assets and child support, those issues would be addressed at a later date. Brant and his affair partner need to be held accountable for their actions. "So Brant still hasn't told you?" "I've been living here just to get ready to move out. I've recently found a new place, and I'm getting ready to leave next week," I explained. Throughout the conversation, my mother-in-law had remained silent on the other end. It seemed that the facts I relayed had shocked her deeply. "If you're not going to say anything, I'm going to hang up," I added. At this, my mother-in-law reacted with an exclamation of surprise. "How could you do this? Why would you divorce without my consent? There's no need for family consent to get a divorce. There is no such rule. "What are you trying to say?" I responded calmly. All she could do was groan in response. Then, a woman's voice, presumably from the travel agency, could be heard. "I'm sorry, but this credit card cannot be used. There's a charge of $20,000. How would you like to proceed?" Unbelievable. My mother-in-law had tried to charge $20,000 on my black card without my permission. Even though I was the breadwinner and owned a black card, I never expected such a large sum to be used without my consent. As I was taken aback, my mother-in-law asked in a panicked voice, "Why did you cancel the black card?" "Why? Because you snooped on my PIN. I mentioned earlier that you had peeked at it without permission. Did you think I didn't notice? There was an incident when we dined out with 4 people, including my mother-in-law. I had no cash at hand, so I used my black card to pay. The moment I pulled the card from my wallet, I saw her eyes gleam noticeably. And afterwards, she continued to watch the movements of my card closely. Clearly, my mother-in-law had a financial obsession. I knew she was interested in imposing financial burdens on me, but I never imagined she would target my black card. Nor did I expect her to sneak up behind me during a payment to steal my PIN. She might have thought she was being sneaky, but I could clearly hear her heavy breathing. After that incident, I immediately canceled the black card. Since I rarely used that card and had other credit cards, there was no inconvenience caused by its cancellation. "So, you will have to make the payment yourself," I told my mother-in-law. She was at a loss for words again, clearly not expecting that her snooping had been discovered. She probably thought it was a perfect plan where she could travel for free and continue her mistreatment of me. But I am not so naive to fall into such a simple trap. From the other end of the phone, I could hear the voices of the relatives. "Sylvia, what do you mean you can't pay? What's going to happen with the Hawaii trip?" Their frustration was mounting, and I could hear my mother-in-law scrambling to make excuses to her relatives. Feeling that continuing this conversation would be a waste of time, I sighed and said, "Then, I'll be hanging up now." Wait a minute. My mother-in-law was still trying to say something, but I mercilessly ended the call. With a look of disbelief, I organized my wallet and then immediately began packing for the move. I didn't have many personal belongings, so the packing would likely be finished quickly. After organizing my own things, I planned to help Tyler, but this plan was interrupted by the sound of the front door slamming open. Frantic footsteps rushed towards my room. "What do you mean by this?" "You've made me look foolish. Welcome back. How was your trip? The payment is on hold. You come with me to the store right now. You're paying the $20,000. As my mother-in-law ranted, I gave her a look of anger. Never having seen such a reaction from me before, she was visibly shaken. "Why should I pay for your travel expenses? Brant and I are divorced, and legally we are strangers. Please understand that fact properly. How can you speak to your mother-in-law like that? That's because you are no longer my mother-in-law. Can't you understand that? Are you stupid?" My words struck home without restraint, causing her face to rapidly lose color. Previously, I had been somewhat lenient because she was Brant's mother, but I had decided that was no longer necessary. When my mother-in-law glared at me tensely, she snapped, "Do whatever you want. It will be a relief if you're gone. Just leave Tyler behind. He has a role to inherit the house." I was astounded by her statement, but just then, Tyler, who had just returned home, changed the atmosphere. "Please stop joking like that. I'm leaving with Mom. Living here with my father and you, grandmother, would be torture. No amount of money would make me stay." "Tyler, what are you saying? Have you been brainwashed by this fool?" my mother-in-law harshly criticized me, but Tyler and I could only respond with disbelief. In his retort, Tyler said, "The fool is you, Grandma. And what are you trying to make me inherit anyway? There's nothing worth inheriting here. Just an old house and some undesirable land." Indeed, the house wasn't particularly valuable. It was an old building on unattractive land whose asset value had significantly declined over the years. Afterwards, my mother-in-law collapsed on the spot, exhausted, and we could only watch. Meanwhile, I continued preparing for the move and pursued property division claims against Brandt. Though I couldn't expect a large amount from his income, the importance of making him feel responsible for his actions outweighed the actual amount claimed. I also demanded an apology from Brandt's affair partner and ultimately held them both accountable. Although the property division might have been a small amount for Brandt, it was a significant blow for him. He ended up depleting his savings and even selling personal belongings to manage his daily expenses. As they struggled financially, my mother-in-law, who couldn't curb her wasteful spending, did not seek employment. Eventually, Brandt was forced to let go of the house and land, which were hardly worth anything. The little money gained from the sale was all that remained for his living expenses. They moved into a dilapidated apartment, facing numerous difficulties day by day. Finally, my mother-in-law managed to find work, but her difficult personality made it impossible for her to keep a job for long.